The system we have come to call capitalism was not born as a villain. It was born out of human instinct, the instinct to survive, to create, to accumulate, to grow. But like all instincts that are left unexamined, it eventually turned into an unconscious force, a ghost that haunts the corridors of our civilization without a name, without a face. It is not the nature of man to be wholly conscious. Much of what drives us lies beneath the surface, in the deep waters of the unconscious, and capitalism, being a creation of man, follows the same psychological law. It too has an unconscious, a shadow, a dark double that it never wished to confront. We created a god out of markets and interest rates. We bowed before quarterly reports and GDP figures, but in our worship, we forgot that all gods demand sacrifice. The sacrifice we offered was our inner life, our peace, our meaning, our connection to something deeper than accumulation. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. Jung once said, "Capitalism became a narcotic, a compulsive idealism. It promised freedom but bound us in chains made of time, labor, and fear of not having enough." At first, it appeared as the liberator. The factory freed the farmer from feudal lords. The bank offered dreams in the form of credit. But over time, this liberator turned tyrant. And like all tyrants, it grew paranoid, suspicious of any who questioned it. To question capitalism today is to risk being called mad, naive, or worse, ungrateful. Yet those who dare to examine it are not enemies of progress. They are, in fact, the guardians of the soul. The soul does not speak in profit margins. It speaks in symbols, dreams, myths, and suffering. The soul longs for meaning, not material. When it is ignored, it does not remain silent. It manifests as neurosis, depression, burnout, alienation. We have structured a society that rewards the persona and starves the self. We are praised for how well we play our economic roles, but punished when we dare to reveal our true face. Jung taught that the persona is only a mask, a necessary adaptation to society. But when the mask becomes our identity, we suffer. Capitalism has enshrined the mask and called itself worth. The collapse we speak of is not merely economic. It is spiritual. It is psychological. The structures outside crumble when the structures within are neglected for too long. Our systems reflect our psyches. A world obsessed with productivity mirrors a psyche at war with rest. A market that demands infinite growth reflects a mind that refuses stillness, that cannot bear emptiness. The archetype of the merchant has overtaken the archetype of the sage. Wisdom has been devalued. Silence has no market value. So we fill the void with noise, advertisements, news cycles, consumer choices. But the psyche, unlike the market, does not forget. What we suppress returns with force. We see it now in our collective exhaustion, our disillusionment, our hunger for something real. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung said. And so, the collapse we fear is not only inevitable, it is necessary. Pain is not punishment, it is initiation. What collapses is not truth, but illusion. Capitalism built an illusion that we could control life through supply and demand, that we could bypass mortality by accumulating more, that worth could be measured by productivity. These were never truths. They were defenses against the terror of the void. But the void is sacred. In silence, in stillness, we remember we are more than economic entities. Jung also wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. The current model has swung toward nonsense, a nonsense that parades as reason because it lines up on spreadsheets. But the soul cannot be charted. It rebels against being quantified. And so, in quiet ways, people are breaking, quitting, questioning. The great resignation was not laziness. It was unconscious rebellion. The collective unconscious is stirring. It is whispering dreams of a different world, not one without work or effort, but one where labor is connected to love, not survival. As the old order crumbles, we must ask, what inner structure are we building? What archetype will replace the one that is dying? Jung insisted that we each have a responsibility to individuate, to become whole. The same is true of cultures. Our civilization must now seek wholeness or perish in fragmentation. This is why capitalism will collapse, not because of conspiracy or incompetence, but because it refuses to become whole. It denies its shadow. It exiles the soul. No structure that denies the totality of the human being can last forever. It may dominate for a season, but time bows only to wholeness. Money, once a tool, became a god, but the god has grown silent. Its temples, stock exchanges, banks, corporate towers, echo with emptiness. Even now, within these walls, the managers and strategists sense it. They look into charts and see decline, but they do not yet know that the decline began in the soul long before it showed up on graphs. The collapse is not doom. It is transformation. The phoenix must burn to rise again. The collapse clears the ground for the birth of something truer. In dreams, we often encounter buildings collapsing, floods rising, roads vanishing. These are symbols of psychic change. What we resist inwardly, we manifest outwardly, and what is capitalism but a collective dream, now turning into a nightmare from which we must awaken? We cannot reform our way out. Reform is stitching new cloth on a torn spirit. We must transmute. We must reimagine not just the system, but the self. The new world cannot be born through ideology alone. It must emerge from the depths, from the integration of shadow, the encounter with meaning, the rebirth of soul. Let the collapse come, not in violence, but in insight. Let it be a sacred death, a ritual shedding of illusions, for what follows collapse is not chaos. It is clarity. The psyche always seeks balance. And where we have grown too far from nature, from each other, from self, the balancing force is returning. You feel it in your own fatigue, in your longing, in the way you question your role in this machine. This longing is not weakness. It is wisdom awakening. It is the soul remembering its true home. Do not rush to replace the system with another machine. Let silence speak. Let the new arise not from fear, but from vision. Jung reminded us that the symbols of transformation are everywhere, in myth, in dream, in suffering. Look not to Wall Street, but inward. What you build now must be anchored in meaning, not profit, in presence, not performance. The world that is coming will not reward the loudest, but the most authentic. Its currency will not be money but depth, not competition but connection. Its leaders will not be masters of markets, but masters of themselves. We are entering a liminal space, a psychic wilderness, and in that space we rediscover archetypes long forgotten: the healer, the mystic, the guardian, the poet. Their return marks the end of the age of the banker and the CEO. The collapse of capitalism is not the end of civilization. It is the end of unconsciousness. We will still build, trade, create, but from a different center, not ego, but soul. Each of us must now do the inner work. The system outside cannot change unless the individual inside awakens. Ask yourself, where have you betrayed your depth for safety? Where have you sold your time without asking why? The market has no answer for these questions. Only you do. Withdraw your projections, reclaim your power, refuse to be a product, refuse to be a cog, choose meaning over comfort, depth over distraction. The collapse is already happening, quietly. Internally, subtly, do not fear it, welcome it, for in this collapse you are being invited, not to destruction, but to awakening, to wholeness, to truth, to the sacred task of becoming fully human. And that is something no market can ever buy or sell. What collapses outwardly is always preceded by an inner disintegration. The mask begins to slip. The lies grow harder to maintain. The collective dream begins to crack, and through the fractures, truth emerges, not loud, but undeniable. We are beginning to feel the consequences of a system that has exhausted its symbols. Capitalism once symbolized freedom, opportunity, and advancement, but now its symbols have become hollow. The mansion is a prison. The suit is a disguise. The salary is a leash. Symbols are powerful because they carry psychological energy. When a symbol loses its energy, it becomes a husk, and the psyche moves on to find a living symbol. That is what we are witnessing. The myth of capitalism no longer stirs the soul. A dying myth is not a small matter. It leads to despair. People are not merely unemployed, they are disoriented. They are not simply poor in finance, but impoverished in meaning. The modern soul does not starve from lack of things, but from lack of purpose, and purpose cannot be manufactured. It cannot be advertised into existence. It must be discovered, often in the depths, often in solitude, and always through the confrontation with the shadow. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The same is true of civilizations. Until the unconscious greed, fear, and dominance are made conscious, they will continue to drive us toward collapse. You may be tempted to escape through distraction, scrolling, spending, numbing, but the soul will not be bypassed. It waits, patiently, and when ignored, it sends symptoms: restlessness, anxiety, dreams that disturb. These are not afflictions to silence, but messages to listen to. They are signs that you are not in alignment with your true nature. And if enough individuals experience this dislocation, the collective psyche begins to shift. You may have noticed how more people speak of burnout now than of ambition, more seek rest than hustle, more long for simplicity than expansion. These are not market trends, they are signs of psychic realignment. The old world told us that we are what we produce, but now people hunger to simply be, to breathe, to feel, to reconnect with the mystery that no algorithm can decode. Capitalism promised us efficiency, but it delivered fragmentation. Our lives are divided into roles, tasks, metrics, and targets. The sacred is nowhere to be found in this segmentation. To live psychologically means to seek wholeness, not perfection, not profit, but inner harmony. It is the only antidote to the sickness of disconnection. We are not machines. We are mythic beings. Our psyche moves in rhythms, not deadlines. We bloom in cycles, not quotas. To force ourselves into linear, endless productivity is to violate our very essence. The world is awakening to this truth, and the system that denies it must collapse, not in punishment, but in mercy, for what follows will be more human. There will still be markets, yes, but they will not rule us. There will still be labor, but it will not consume us. There will still be ambition, but it will be tempered by wisdom. What you must do now is become conscious. Observe the ways in which you have internalized the values of the collapsing system. How you judge your worth by output, how you fear rest, how you distrust your own intuition. This is not your fault. It is your inheritance, but you are not condemned to repeat it. You are invited to transform it. Individuation, the core of Jung's philosophy, is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who capitalism wants you to be, not what your resume says, but who you are beneath the mask. And this journey begins not with rebellion, but with reflection. Ask yourself, what part of me was sold for security? What dream did I abandon to survive? In that morning, a new truth is born. It is quieter than marketing slogans, softer than economic forecasts, but it is more enduring. The coming age will value the soul again. It will rediscover the sacred in nature, in ritual, in relationship. It will teach children to listen to dreams, not just follow instructions. It may not happen overnight. The collapse may be gradual. There will be resistance. There will be denial. But as Jung said, what you resist persists. The more we resist the soul's truth, the more we suffer. Look around. Systems are failing, yes. But what is rising? Communities, conversations, questions, consciousness, the very things that cannot be bought or sold. The archetype of the healer is returning. So is the visionary. The systems we build next must emerge not from fear of the old, but from the call of the new. This new order will be rooted in psyche, in soul, in the eternal truth that each human is not a resource but a universe, not a consumer but a creator. Your task is not to save the old world. It is to midwife the birth of the new. To live as though the sacred matters, to choose meaning even when it costs more, that is how collapse becomes rebirth, not through external revolution, but through internal revelation. Jung said, "The world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. That thread is frayed now, but it can be rewoven, with truth, with depth, with consciousness. Do not despair as the structures fall. Instead, build inward, strengthen your center, connect to others who have heard the same call. For what comes next is not a utopia, but a return to what is real, what is whole, what is eternal. You will know it by its feeling, not urgency, but peace, not pressure, but presence, not accumulation, but alignment. The soul cannot live in a marketplace, but it can emerge from its ruins, carrying the wisdom we tried so hard to forget. And in that emergence, the real wealth will be found, not in profit, but in presence. Not in assets, but in awareness, not in owning more, but in being more. This is the new foundation. It will not collapse, for it is built not on numbers, but on truth. And truth, once awakened, never dies.